In the West today, we live a fast life. We sleep less, eat more, think quick, and text in shorthand. We live as individuals with credit cards that make everything affordable. In a godless world where sex is everywhere but in the bedroom, democracy is for dreamers, and a couple with kids is an endangered species. Very confusing. No time for clear thinking, and no money for a good education.
Top from aristocracy and clergy, education was broadened into the masses.
It's made the West the West. But we're losing our faculties in this modern blizzard of moneyed lives. The 3 R's are history. Teachers are trivialized, and educational institutions.
Education's really struggling. It's a funny thing that in Australia we claim that we value young people, and we talk very beautifully about that, but we show our contempt for them by the amount of money that we allocate to their education, for example, by the way that we structure schools. There is evidence everywhere we look at just how little we value children. And so we talk the talk, but don't walk the walk.
On this patch of Australian Arcadia, one man is attempting to reacquaint school students with the wonder of learning.
Yeah, I really see wisdom as pretty high on the curriculum, but I wouldn't put it in those words. I wouldn't timetable wisdom for an hour a day, much as I'd like to. But I want to give people experiences that will help them understand life as a more complex and even baffling force than they have previously understood it to be. And I guess it's like that quote from T.S. Eliot, we had the experience but we missed the meaning. You can acquire wisdom by reading. Books like Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. That was a big one for me and still is, I guess.
John Marsden is a best-selling children's book author, and despite his commercial success, he's staying at the front line of education.
This is that in a book, the plot is also a character going from here to here, ignorance to awareness. Harry Potter is ignorant. He has no idea of his own qualities, his own abilities. He doesn't even know how his parents died. But by the end of the first book, he's pretty aware. It's like our understanding of how to get to wisdom has changed, and our prioritising of it has changed. I think it's seen as a rather frivolous or trivial or irrelevant pursuit in modern life, and schools naturally reflect that, so there's very little attempt to develop that in most schools that I've seen.
Indeed, school these days is more about hothousing kids into university to get a vocation that'll earn a decent position at the salary trough.
His mindset is shifting from humanity and friendship and enjoying life to not enjoying it, but how can you use it to your advantage? So people are used to enjoy life, and that's what people want to do, but they're usually so caught up in thinking, I want to enjoy life, but I have to make it work for me. And in having that mindset, they're then taken away from things like English into maths and economics, because they're the things which will get you money.
Macbeth and his wife are ignorant and remain ignorant for too long. By the time they start inching towards awareness again, it's too late. They're doomed by their ignorance. What I like at university is always the arts faculty, because that is the only faculty which is dedicated to opening people's minds. Every other faculty, by necessity, is dedicated to closing your mind and causing you to focus more and more intently and specifically on one area. And so my bias towards arts is because it is designed, the whole concept of it, the whole principle of it, the purpose of it is to open the mind, and to, by learning history and psychology and Japanese or whatever, you become a more aware and inevitably wiser person.
When I went to university, it had something to do with getting a real job. But really, it was about learning how to think.
Opening the mind to the wisdoms of yesterday and tomorrow. After all, what is the West if not a rich palette of deeply layered societies that are crucibles of infinite science, disciplined industry, provocative art, music and architecture?
If there's one thing that I learned after years of stumbling through schools and universities, it was to ask, why?
But why? 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 Why?
Why am I here? Why reach beyond my grasp? Why is about the limitless, even the spiritual.
I think there's such a thing as a calling. I know it's unfashionable to say that these days, and I've always felt that doing theoretical physics is my calling, that I was born to do it. It's in my soul. And from the earliest age I can remember, before I even knew what physics meant, I was fascinated by the idea of atoms and stars and hidden things, wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation we couldn't see but were going right through us. All of this really fascinated me, the idea that there is a sort of hidden realm just around us, or maybe just look up in the sky. There's a wonderland up there just above our heads.
Then we map this pi of x across to here. It'll get mapped to 5 pi of x. One goes into pure mathematics not thinking that it will be used one day, but rather that it's just as much an art form and a beautiful art form as fine music, sculpture or painting. The feeling of universities, it's a forum of ideas. And it's not, for me, a place where I can get a degree and then can earn big dollars, in my first year of employment in the workforce. It's a place where I open the mind to new ideas, and it's a place where you can just take ideas for, I guess, by accident. A lot of the mathematics that is developed now, or in the relative modern day, may not have applications now, but can be indispensable maybe 20, 50 years from now. The greatest example that carries a lot of weight is the formation of propositional calculus.
What?
Of propositional calculus, which is it's a sort of a formal language of expressions and implications, which probably seems very, very irrelevant to a normal conversation, but is completely indispensable if you're going to write computer programs. All that sort of formal language has to be given into the computer so the computer knows precisely what needs to be done. Another aspect is coding systems, elliptic curve cryptography. Without elliptic curve cryptography, we wouldn't be able to have all these secure information systems that we have today.
In English, that translates to, you'll never know when that'll come in handy. But that intellectual walk in the woods does take a little faith, not to mention patience. Qualities that are being forced out of fashion by a short-term, results-driven world.
Critical thinking to conquer the impossible and husband inspiration has been relegated to second division since economic buffheads have taken over the campus and turned students into consumers.
Well, I'm very depressed when I think back over the last 30 years or so I've been in the university system, and it has got worse and worse. Students are much more cold, calculating and cynical. They want to be fast-tracked through an easy course to a lucrative profession.
Money is time, and thus education, more than ever, is about the finite and the measurable. About bottom-line accountability and ripping off public thinking for private profit.
You actually made it known by the cigarette companies. There are lots of points where market forces protect themselves rather than protect the public, and specifically rather than protect the public.
Amongst other things, unassuming microbiologist Professor Graham Laver changed the way the world looked at influenza. His research has helped save millions of lives. In 2001, he gave evidence at a Senate inquiry regarding his submission on public universities and our higher education needs, in which he essentially bagged commercially driven research funding for unis. Incidentally, after saying so, the university expelled him.
Ever since I started work at the university, nobody ever told me what to do. When I first arrived at the John Curtin School of Medical Research, I was given a lab. I was told by the director, stock up the lab with equipment and get on with the work. And that was it. Never any suggestion that I should do anything like that. And that's, I think, how it should be.
So what's changed?
What's changed? I think now, if you come to the institute if I was working, you're put into a big team. You're told what to work on, and a lot of the work you do is thought to have commercial application, and commercial rules apply. In other words, you can't talk to people freely about the work, you can't discuss it, and I think it's a disaster. I don't know the exact figure, but there's probably about 60 or 70 small biotech companies in Australia, all trying to produce marketable products. I don't think any of them have had any success.
If you have big business trying to limit and contain the pursuit of ideas to the merely profitable, for cures for AIDS, heart disease or cancer will only do so if there's a buck in it. Be it science or arts, schools and universities have been the intellectual place to live. We must continue to fund and receive from these hallowed halls some meaning to many a modern life without any. But how classic are the classics? Literature, Latin, languages? What about geography? Or even anthropology, a very Western university subject about cultural adventures?
Anthropology is all about people. It's about cultural diversity across the world and within a society like Australia. It's teaching our students about how the world makes sense, makes meaning for people, whether they're rich or poor, of particular ethnic or religious backgrounds and so on. So anthropology these days is quite a diverse area of research and teaching.
So it's about meaning of life.
Yes, I think one of the things we first teach our students in first year is that the object of the exercise is to the great tradition, the great signature method of anthropology, to find what the world means to people. A big challenge in a country like Australia, I think, anthropologically speaking, is how do people connect with the nature of the continent and with its species of plants and animals. And Australian Aboriginal cultures, from the point of anthropology, have always been incredibly important. You can't work for many years with the detailed bodies of Aboriginal knowledge just about plants and animals and topography and landscapes without realising that that culture has a huge amount to offer the rest of the society in its future development and negotiation of an identity in the land.
But the rest of society's not interested anymore. Learning from the past is redundant in big city life. The only education required to get ahead today is one that'll earn enough to get a mortgage, a new car, and an annual holiday. Bottom line is that there is a bottom line. The West's greatest achievement is being priced to sell, like factory trinkets to straight-A students with a loan and Johnny Foreigner with a fistful of cash. It's unseemly and unfortunate that after 2,000 years survival of the richest, offering a lolly bag of lucrative, market-friendly, dumbed-down degrees. So long, Socrates.
We should be thinking about who we are, how we are, and why shit happens infinitely. in the quest to make us better people, and not creating a country of intelligent fools who can count but can't think.
Now, knowledge is easy to access, but it's very difficult to discriminate knowledge. Overwhelmingly what we must be about is knowledge discrimination. You can go to the internet, you can put in search, you can get every topic that you possibly want. You can access the information, that's not a problem. What is a problem is to know what is sensible, what is relevant, and that's this deeper understanding which takes you through to wisdom.
But can wisdom get you a job today?
A lot of parents would say, well, arts and humanities won't get you a job.
Yeah, I've done okay out of the arts and humanities, and so do lots of people. That's a really... I come across that line of argument all the time with young people who want to be authors, and their parents inevitably say to them, get something behind you first, as though it's some kind of sequential progress in your life, that first you become a dentist and then you become an author, when of course it doesn't work like that at all. If you want to write, you'll find a way to write no matter what you're doing anyway, but to foster that instead of to prioritise it at such a low position is to deny the drive of the person who has that as their passion.
What happens is that interest in the humanities waxes and wanes in response to quite short-term shifts in public opinion. But specialised knowledges are important to maintain, and you have to maintain them even if sometimes they're unpopular. Now, in our case, in Australia, our expertise in Asian studies generally has run down dramatically. It is the case that when relief teams went into parts of Indonesia after the tsunami and the earthquake, they did not have a single person with them who could, of having the languages, let alone knowing what are the kind of kinship structures there, how does the society work, what's the best way to inject help so it actually has diffusion and repercussions throughout the society. All of those things need to be known. You don't know what kind of knowledge you're going to need in the future. If you're going to have commercialised knowledge, it's got to be balanced by at least as much investment in knowledge for its own sake, simply because commercial knowledge will only support its own short-term objectives. We want this nation to have long-term objectives, and to do that you've got to provide a knowledge base that is wide as it possibly can be.
The search for meaning doesn't have to be via a maze of humanities or Neil's pure maths, but it has to be about truth, wisdom, even the divine. But let's not trip up on the rhetoric. We say we want our children to have the best education possible, to be responsible and civil to one another. But in many of our schools, we refuse to teach right and wrong. We say we want to encourage virtue and honour among the young, but we're loose with ethics and ridicule talk of morality. We say education is an investment, yet we now discount the intellectual heroes who underwrite this Western life by forcing them to join our mindless pursuit of money. We're giving up on our history.
History, I've been arguing, is a story about where we've come from and where we're going to. And stories aren't just luxuries, they're what hold a whole society together. Now, if you eliminate the passing on of these stories from generation to generation, which is really what we're doing with our education system, you've undermined the very foundation of your society.
Near the coast, a couple of hours north of Sydney, Neil lives quietly with his mum and dad. He may be just another bright suburban kid who's finding his way through life, but education has given him a map.
And once you've learnt or experienced a sort of a mathematical formula, it sort of gives you a sort of sense of happiness, but you also know that it'll be with you for the rest of your days. You think this is an experience that cannot be taken away or replicated, somewhere else. You don't feel it's a great high and then a lull after it. So I think this sort of education and thought process is far more fulfilling than watching a reality television show.
In practicing science, myself, when I think of the things that interest me, there is a spiritual dimension to it for me, a bit like what Einstein called a cosmic religious feeling. It's a feeling that the universe is ordered and it's intelligible and it's elegant, and this I find tremendously inspiring. It's not only that I look out and see the stars and the galaxies and the trees around me and I think, well, this is all very beautiful. Of course it is. There's this hidden elegance in the mathematical order of the universe.
What's wisdom, you think?
I think it's having a sense of how to deal with situations, deal with every situation, and not stuff things up, really. Just to be yourself and to have your sense of freedom and knowledge and use it and apply it in your life.
Which is very important to me because I think there is something intrinsically good for the human soul about getting your hands dirty, plunging your hands into the earth, growing vegetables, growing flowers. There's something inherently good about rolling down hills and climbing trees and running free. And I think also the fact that we will establish an atmosphere which is warm and welcoming and a joyful place, a place full of surprises, a place full of laughter, a place full of music and beautiful things.
Well, the short answer to what happens when you stop asking the big questions is you lose the capacity to generate the answers.
I want to lend my ear to great ideas, mad music, delicious writing, and undaunted imagination. All of that made the West that I loved, and children of a lesser education will only swell the tide of the West's meaningless decadence.
We live in such disposable times that we seem to bring this into our relationships as well, and our sense of what love should be, that if it doesn't work, chuck it. You know, if it doesn't fit all the criteria, we're very prescriptive about what we want. And when it doesn't work, we chuck it, we get a new one. We're into high turnover, high volume, competition. All of that, feeds a very narcissistic kind of environment in which we're trying to find love. A very confusing one too, I think.